네, 외신기자 여러분.
Good afternoon to our member of the foreign press. I am Choi Myung-soo, Foreign Media Relations Officer at Korean Culture and Information Service of Ministry of Culture, Sports and Tourism. And let us now begin the FPCKorea Policy Forum with Minister Kang Eun-ho of Defense Acquisition Program Administration. The FPCKorea Policy Forum is an event to inform in detail and discuss with the foreign media and governments concerning major policies of the Korean government. The Korea Culture and Information Service of the Ministry of Culture, Sports and Tourism invites ministers and vice ministers of government bodies every month for the event. The topic of today's forum is main achievements and direction of the Korea's defense program. Please allow me to mention that the administration is meeting its 15th anniversary. And first, we have Mr. Kang Eun-ho, Minister of Defense Acquisition Program Administration. Please give him a big round of applause, who will be giving his opening remarks. He passed the Higher Civil Service National Examination in 1989, served as the Director General for Planning and Coordination, Deputy Minister for Program Management, and Vice Minister of DAPA, and became the 11th Minister of Defense Acquisition last December. We have also joining us Mr. Kang Hwan-seok, Director General for Planning and Coordination of DAPA, who will inform us on Korea's defense program policies and institutional framework. And we have 4 additional participants. We have Mr. Kim Seng, Director General for International Cooperation, Kim Tae-gon, Director General for Defense Acquisition Policy Bureau, Kim Il-dong, Director General for Advanced Capabilities Program Support Department, and Seo Yong-won, spokesperson of DAPA. Today's policy forum is being broadcast live on the Korean YouTube of KTV and Arirang TV's English YouTube channel. Korean-English simultaneous interpretation service is provided on site. In accordance with COVID-19 control guidelines, we have on site today 23 foreign correspondents, of whom were selected based on the order that they signed up. For our foreign journalists who could not attend in person, please join us via the live broadcast on YouTube, and you are welcome to post questions real-time on the online group messenger. The forum will start off with remarks by Minister Kang Eun-ho, followed by a short video, and then we will listen to the presentation by Director General Kang Hwan-seok, after which we will have an overall Q&A session. And there are many sensitive issues with regard to this topic, with regard to the detailed weapons systems, quotes, and pricing are sensitive issues, and we may not be able to respond due to confidentiality reasons. I do ask for your understanding, and let us now invite Minister Kang for his opening remarks.
Good afternoon. I'm Eun-ho Kang, the Minister of DAPA, Korea. First of all, thank you very much for your joining us today. I have heard that you have shown keen interest in Korea's defense acquisition programs and defense industries. I'm very grateful to be here with you. As you know, DAPA was founded in 2006. Since then, DAPA has handled the whole national defense acquisition programs to improve defense capabilities of Korea. In this process, DAPA has focused on strengthening national defense technology and fostering local defense industries. Today, we will deliver some of DAPA's achievements and introduce future policy directions. And also, we'll have the opportunity to discuss with the journalists from this wonderful Foreign Correspondents Club. As far as I know, this is the first time for DAPA to host the policy forum with foreign correspondents. I am here with sincere and open hearts. I strongly hope today's discussion will be very fruitful to all of us. Once again, thank you very much for your participation amid COVID-19 pandemic. Thank you.
네, 감사합니다.
Thank you very much, Minister Kang. Next is an introductory video on Korea's defense program. Please play the video.
A future that our people dream of, a future that we are going to secure, DAPA. A new leap forward, the future, DAPA. Since its establishment in 2006, DAPA has been pursuing its path as a professional defense acquisition agency with a primary focus on maintaining peace and security of Korea. DAPA has marked important moments in the history of Korea's defense industry with R&D of weapon systems and increase of defense exports. In 2017, we moved our headquarters to the Gwacheon government complex after a decade in the Yongsan government building and used the move as an opportunity to start all over again across our entire organization. In 2021, we launched the Defense Acquisition Program Training Institute as a world-class professional educational institution to lead innovation of the National Defense Program. DAPA consists of efficient and professional organizations that fit into each defense program and role. For every important project, DAPA ensures decision-making is transparent and efficient by holding a Defense Acquisition Program Promotion Committee. DAPA has a definite goal towards the future. To complete the establishment of a rapid and efficient national defense acquisition system, the DAPA is currently concentrating on improving its weapon system acquisition procedure, establishing more rational decision-making and collaboration systems, and enhancing its agency-wide acquisition expertise. To realize technological development in more creative and ever bolder ways, we are transitioning to a pioneering defense R&D management system so that our innovative technologies can meet the demand for weapon systems in the midst of the Fourth Industrial Revolution. By enhancing South Korea's ability to develop advanced weapon systems and strengthening the global competitiveness of its defense industry in the global market, the DAPA is pursuing not only the creation of an entrepreneurial ecosystem for the industry, but also its transformation into an export-oriented industry that creates numerous jobs. The DAPA has continued to improve the reliability of its work performance by establishing transparent and fair work systems, enhancing the professional expertise of its personnel, and creating a pioneering work environment for the entire national defense industry. DAPA is building up a robust national defense that secures the future. DAPA is establishing a perfect defense system protecting our people's future. From world-renowned K-2 main battle tank, Chunmu missile system, a core strategic weapon for self-defense, Sejong, the great-class Aegis destroyer, which is named after the most respected king in Korean history, to the first domestic fighter jet FA-50, which perfectly replaced outdated F-5, DAPA is securing Korea with our own technology. Across the country, newly developed lightly armored helicopters will replace the existing attack helicopters. In 2021, Korea will deploy its first 3,000-ton class submarine, Changbogo-3, which has been nicknamed the turtle ship of the 21st century. The development of the KF-21, a Korean-style fighter aircraft, is near completion. The Republic of Korea will then be reborn as a nation with world-class national defense capabilities. DAPA leads the future with the Fourth Industrial Revolution. The DAPA is also promoting the establishment of an exclusive organization that focuses on developing game changers in the field of global weapon systems and applying world-class technologies to our country's core weapon systems. Last but not least, the DAPA is working hard to produce a blueprint for the Korean Space Defense Project that will contribute to the development of both space security and the space economy, as so that Korea can accelerate its involvement in space development following the end of the ROK-US bilateral missile guidelines and successfully develop a space rocket. Technologies acquired by convergence of the world-class IT applications and national defense, outstanding private companies, and joint defense projects with research institutions would be utilized again in the product development in private sectors. As Korea went through pain and tragedy of war, DAPA will fulfill all of its responsibilities as a professional defense acquisition agency for a complete self-defense. We have a dream. For all Korean citizens to follow their dreams, we will continue to safeguard peaceful Korea. It is a future that DAPA dreams of. A future that we are going to secure. A future that our people dream of. DAPA.
네, 감사합니다.
Thank you. I would now like to invite Director General Kang Hwan-seok for his presentation on policies, initiatives, and institutional backdrop of Korea's defense program. Director General Kang, you have the floor. Good afternoon. I am Kang Hwan-seok, Director General for Planning and Coordination at DAPA. And I will be giving a presentation at today's policy forum. And let me now elaborate on the key achievements of DAPA and its policy direction for 2021. If you have any questions about the contents of the presentation or other policies and programs of DAPA, please post the questions and we will have them addressed after the presentation.
먼저 주요 성과입니다.
Let me first go over the key achievements of DAPA. First is to engage in efficient implement of force improvement programs. We have been focused on Korean missile defense and strategic target strike and improved project management efficiency by reorganizing the organization into a project management-oriented organization and operating the Defense Acquisition Program Committee. So it's the seamless implementation of force improvement programs. Second, we created an enabling environment for the development of challenge-oriented and innovative defense science and technology. We enacted a law to lay the groundwork for innovative research and defense R&D and introduced a rapid prototyping and acquisition program to rapidly deploy cutting-edge commercial technologies. We are also bearing fruit through military-civilian cooperation. The third achievement is the establishment of an innovative defense industry ecosystem. We enacted laws to create a growth momentum for the defense industry and introduced the Defense Industry Innovation Cluster and Banking Program. Furthermore, with strengthened support in various programs aimed at enhancing the competitiveness of defense industries, revenue and the number of workforce in the defense sector is continuously increasing. Fourth, the export competitiveness of the defense industry has improved. In 2019, for the first time in its history, Korea became one of the top 10 exporters in its share of world arms and secured an important status in diversifying its defense export items. In addition, by expanding MOUs with export partners, we have strengthened the foundation for further defense industrial cooperation. And lastly, we brought about enhanced professionalism and expertise and transparency in the defense industry. We have expanded re-employment restrictions to retirees in the defense sector, introduced a debriefing program, and established and implemented measures to prevent and eradicate unauthorized transfer of defense technologies of the Agency for Defense Development.
Next, I'd like to brief you on the direction forward for defense acquisition in 2021. First of all, we will pursue seamless acquisition programs. As of 2021, DAPA is implementing 197 Force Improvement Plan projects, including the KF-21. We are also promoting projects to maximize the performance and operability of our existing weapon systems. To ensure stable progress of our projects, we are taking preemptive measures to prevent any project delays due to COVID-19, while also engaging in mutual cooperation with all relevant stakeholders. Secondly, we will promote structural reform in support of fielding advanced technologies, including the adoption of an evolutionary acquisition process. We are working to reform the acquisition process to facilitate a more efficient acquisition and establish a rapid acquisition process to field the capabilities acquired through these programs. Furthermore, we are preparing for new security domains, such as with the Fourth Industrial Revolution and the dawn of the space era. Thirdly, we are establishing an innovative defense R&D framework. We have established the legal and institutional framework to enable creative and challenge-oriented defense R&D, and the technologies obtained through these R&D projects will be used to further reinforce our defense S&T competitiveness. We will also revamp the cooperative mechanisms to create constant results through military-civil cooperation, while reorganizing government-funded agencies and engaging in heavy investment in future challenge-oriented technologies to develop world-class research capabilities. Fourthly, we will build the capacity of the defense industry in the post-COVID era. By strengthening a policy stance that prioritizes domestic R&D, we will implement priority acquisitions of domestic weapons and designate national policy programs and expand projects to locally produce weapons components and parts. We are also promoting policies to support defense exports, as well as enhance the resilience and competitiveness of the local defense industry. Fifthly, we will continue to pursue policies to strengthen the expertise and transparency in defense acquisition. To protect defense technologies, we have established countermeasures against unauthorized transfers of technology and are in the process of amending the relevant law. To enhance the professionalism of defense acquisition, we have established the Defense Acquisition Program Training Institute to provide tailored education and certifications of qualifications. We are also strengthening government-civil cooperation for a more transparent defense acquisition. Next, let me further explain some key policy directions that would be of interest to our foreign correspondents here. First, on priority acquisition of domestic weapons. This system will be implemented to allow for efficient weapons systems acquisition and to strengthen the competitiveness of the domestic defense industry. We will manage FIP foreign spending to expand domestic R&D and make purchase decisions based on a total life cycle-based evaluation of costs and an analysis of the economic impacts of major acquisition programs. To foster international cooperation for foreign acquisitions, we will diversify acquisition pathways and analyze the ratio of domestic parts incorporated into the final products. The second key policy direction is strengthening our bargaining power in foreign purchases. This is our way of strengthening our negotiating edge when making purchases to contribute to the growth of the domestic defense industry, even as we make foreign purchases. To connect foreign purchases to the competitiveness of the local defense industry, we will expand our participation in international joint R&D, become an aviation MRO hub in Northeast Asia, and promote proactive and comprehensive industrial cooperation. To enhance our bargaining power, we will engage in more G2G negotiations for better purchasing terms and conditions, enhance our negotiating power through more offsets, and adjust required capabilities to encourage more competition. With that, I would like to conclude my presentation. Thank you.
감사합니다.
Thank you for your presentation. Next, we would like to engage in a Q&A session, and the questions will be divided into those here and those posed online. If you have any questions, please raise your hand, and once you're called upon, please state your name and affiliation, and please keep your questions brief. And we would appreciate it if you would specify who the question is for. Questions, please.
가장 먼저 손드신 AFP
First, from AFP.
예, 안녕하세요. AFP 통신의
Hello, I am Kang Jin-gyu from AFP, and I have a question for Minister Kang Eun-woo. Recently, North Korea has introduced new missile systems these days, and how do you assess their weapons development in the recent years, and particularly, I would like to understand, are there any weapon systems that may be a threat to Korea's defense? And last but not least, for Korea's defense capabilities, is there a particular weapon system that you believe that would be desirable for Korea to introduce? Thank you. It was a couple of days ago where... Yes, would you like to speak up, please? And I'm sure that you all know that North Korea is very quick in its development. And I do not believe that I'm in the position to assess its developments. But I believe that at the relevant organizations that engage in technical analysis and assessment, I know that it's being done right now with regard to the capabilities of North Korea. And you've mentioned, with regard to the second part of your present question, well, with regard to nuclear missiles, you've mentioned about are there any threats? So I would like to say that the threat with regard to WMD would be probably the biggest threat posed right now. And there are many countermeasures that have been devised to defend Korea, and this is still being done as we speak. And you've mentioned about some desirable weapon systems that we need to introduce. Well, with regard to the decisions made on that front, as you are very well aware, we'll have to analyze the threat, and we need to also understand what advanced warfare would look like in the future. And accordingly, we have to look into the right defense systems, and then we would decide and deliberate on the weapons system. And the relevant, the arms of the RV, Navy, and Air Force would be providing the suggestions, and the CFC would be making the final decision. And I think that's basically it in terms of the my response. Thank you. Moving on to Reuters.
Can someone hand the journalist a microphone, please?
Josh Smith from Reuters. These questions are for whoever can answer them. I have two. The first question would be, North Korea has historically been the focus of South Korea's defense industry and their military here, but there's been in recent years more development towards capabilities that appear useful beyond North Korea, things like the aircraft carrier, for example, submarines, things like that could be used around the world. What potential threats and what roles do you see around the world that South Korea can play that's driving some of your decisions now? Is the first question. And the second question is, there's been some South Korea's submarine development grabbed headlines recently with the test of the SLBM. That also drew some debate over whether South Korea will develop a nuclear propulsion for submarines in the future. Can you tell us what your thinking is on that? Thank you.
Thank you very much for those questions. We are providing simultaneous interpretation services. Korean should be set to 1, and English should be set to 2. I think I can respond to those questions. Well, I believe, if I understood your questions correctly, is whether we are considering any other targets or objects outside of North Korea or beyond North Korea in terms of our defense capabilities. And also, because we have the KSS-3, if we have any commitment to develop a nuclear-powered submarine, a nuclear submarine. So I believe those were your questions. I don't think that it would be correct for me to say that there is any threat, that a virtual or a future threat that we are considering as of the moment. But we are always considering beefing up our defense capabilities in case of any threats in the future, any possible threat. So we are not imagining an imagined foe or an imagined enemy, but we are constantly looking to the future in advancing our defense capabilities. And I believe your question is quite sensitive. Yes, the SLBM has been successfully launched, and currently we are going through analysis and testing. But with nuclear submarines, I don't know if I can call them nuclear submarines or nuclear-powered submarines. But for these nuclear-powered submarines, I think that national policy has to be met first of all. But we have to look at the relevant agreements we've signed and treaties with the U.S., the national policy goals and objectives, and different other factors that we have to consider before we can say with any certainty whether we're going to develop that kind of submarine.
Thank you. Next from Kyoto News, Japan. I am Kokasaka Kentaro from Kyoto's News. You've mentioned about export competitiveness. So I would like to understand which weapon or weapon systems would be your focus. So about in terms of export volume, please pass the mic to our foreign journalists, please. We cannot hear the journalists. So we have many weapons systems that we have introduced, starting from ground-based to aerial, and most of these weapons were exported with our partners around the world. And if I do mention a specific weapon system, it would seem as if I'm supporting a specific defense industry, so I have to be very cautious. But I do want to mention that out of our ground-based weapon systems, we have K2 and the K9, and have various armored vehicles. In the case of we have submarines, and in terms of aerial, we have TOC. So there are many that are being exported.
다시 한번 크게
Thank you very much. I'd like to ask our minister to speak loudly into the microphone.
So I'd like to mention that there are many weapon systems that are being exported. That's both ground, naval ships, as well as aerial. And it's all based on the cooperation with our allies and our partner countries. Thank you.
Yes, I believe Sky News.
영국 스카이뉴스 맹주석 기자인데요. 지금 그 무기 수출에 대해서 말씀하셨는데 해외에서 우리나라 무기를 수입하고자 하는 분야가 주로 그 비행기인지 아니면 탱크인지 미사일인지 SLB인지 이런 거에 대해서 혹시 구체적으로
When foreign countries try to acquire defense weapon systems from our country, is it typically air fighter jets or naval ships or SLBMs? I think that the security environment and the defense capabilities of different countries are different. So I cannot narrow it down to a blanket statement. However, I can say that we enter into intense negotiations with the relevant buyer country before they decide to make a purchase. After 2013 or so, I think that we've seen continued increase, and we're going to continue to see consistent increase in exports of weapon systems going forward.
Yes, from The Economist, Lena Schipper.
Hi, thank you very much. Lena Schipper from The Economist. I was wondering, when you're talking about export competitiveness, Korea is currently the world's 10th biggest exporter of arms, and presumably you're trying to strengthen that position in some way. Which markets are you thinking about in particular when you're talking about exports of these newly developed systems?
기본적으로는
Well, basically, in the process of cooperation with other countries, we do see exports taking place, defense exports taking place. And because I am the Minister of Defense Acquisition, I also hope that we have strengthened export relationships with many countries. But the basic principle here, and the reason why I'm going into this the principle is because Korea is a driving engine, is not arms exports. We wanted to make this clear. That is not our main area. So in the process of promoting exports, there are the various control mechanisms and treaties and agreements where we need to comply with. And we are also focused on international peace and security, and we need to make sure that we do not hinder that. And within that scope and scheme, we engage in weapons exports with our allies. So we want to mention that we do have a clear principle. So with regard to, we do not have a clear target market for our exports. It just comes out and plays out naturally in the process of cooperation. We may also expand our horizon or domains into exports in defense, and in the process, we may export into those markets.
감사합니다. 다음 질문.
Thank you very much. Next question.
네. 먼저 그
If
사우스 차이나 모닝 포스트 먼저 보시죠.
South China Morning Post.
네, 저 박찬경입니다.
My name is Park Chan-gyung.
러시아와의 그 전투기 개발
I want to talk about the development of fighter aircraft with Indonesia. In August, I'm sorry, we have no audio feed into the interpretation booth. We are unable to provide interpretation services at this time.
마이크 상황이
We are having some technical issues at the moment. Please bear with us.
질문해 주시면
Yes, please continue with your question. It's about 30 technical personnel came back, returned to Korea in August. We have once again lost the audio feed of the microphone. We are unable to provide interpretation services at this time. We are unable to provide interpretation services at this time.
기자님 저기 그 기술진이 이제 30명.
You've talked about how about 30 technical experts have returned.
공동 개발은 진행되고 있는 거 분명히 맞고.
And I can say that the joint development is continuing on as planned, and about 100 or so technical experts, I believe it was 100 or so technical experts, additional experts will come to Korea, and we are going to engage in a joint development. When it comes to the sharing of defense spending, this is also some questions that I've been asked at the National Assembly audit, and I can say that we are entering into final negotiations. We're nearing the final stage. I think that we can close the deal very soon in an amiable way. Indonesia and the Republic of Korea have a firm basis of trust, especially when it comes to our defense relations, and I have no doubt of that.
Thank you.
두 번째 질문. 네.
And yes, your next question, please.
죄송합니다. 저기 이런 프레스 TV 먼저 하겠습니다.
Yes, first Press TV. Yes, I am Jennifer Chang from Iran Press TV. We lost the audio once again. Please check the mic.
네, 마이크 상태 다시 한번 점검 부탁합니다.
Yes, please check the audio quality.
네, 다른 마이크 없나요?
Please use the microphone for interpretation.
저 마이크를 사용해
Yes,
주시면
please
고맙겠습니다.
use the mic for interpretation.
가장 그 불평하는 것
Yes,
중에 하나가
North
지금
Korea is particularly complaining about the F-35. This is ultra high-speed fighter jet. And North is not happy with the fact that this was purchased in large volumes. But I know that this wasn't procured by Israel, but is only Korea procuring the F-35? And I'd like to understand the costs and how much was consumed to procure F-35s. And what are the plans forward? Do you have more plans to procure additional units? So I do understand that North Korea is particularly unhappy about this decision. With regard to the introduction of F-35, as was mentioned, Korea introducing advanced weapon systems from allies is based on the consideration of existing threats and future threats. And in that aspect, we've introduced the F-35A. And this is not just in Korea, it's been exported by the U.S. and other partnering countries as far as I know. In the future, with regard to our plans, I cannot mention this in public because it has to do with enhancing our defense capabilities. So I'm sorry I cannot respond to the last part of your question.
Yes, as I mentioned before, for those issues that are quite sensitive, because we are talking about the defense industry, we'd like to ask you kindly for your understanding. Is there any extra question from Reuters?
Thank you. A couple follow-ups again. Next week, there'll be several major events in South Korea that I wanted to ask you about. One is the ADEX exhibition, and I was wondering whether you can give us any kind of brief preview on the main things that you're hoping to accomplish there, either in terms of what South Korea is hoping to sell and or buy, or what we can expect that way. And the other event is the possible launch of South Korea's first domestically produced satellite launch rocket. And I wanted to ask, from a defense standpoint, how important is it that South Korea has a satellite launch vehicle that's completely domestically produced here, as opposed to earlier ones that used parts from Russia or other countries? Thank you.
The ADEX Expo that you mentioned, which is going to be held next week, as you've correctly mentioned. When it comes to any exports or negotiations that we are hoping to make or not to make at that event, I don't think that it would be prudent for me to discuss that at this opportunity right now. This is an international expo of a quite big scale, and our allies and friendly nations would come to this expo and exhibit their weapon systems, so we can learn more about the technological trends of one another and learn more about the advantages and strengths of our weapon systems. So it's an opportunity for us to learn more about that, and also to read the development trends of the defense industry, and also to raise awareness of this to the general public as well. It's not necessarily all about contracts and making purchases. I want to emphasize that, and I hope that the foreign journalists here present today would also come to ADEX next week, and hopefully you will have a chance to see that there are many vendors participating in that expo, which are all from our allies, and you can have a great chance to see the weapon system development, the arc and the trends represented there today. I am also personally very much interested to go see the development trends of the weapon systems of not just Korea, but of our allies and friendly countries. Secondly, with the satellite-powered rockets and launches, you spoke about that and how we consider it to be important. As you know, after the ROK-US summit held in May, the missile guidelines were once again discussed since the summit. But I'm not saying that necessarily that was an opportunity for us to completely change around our development projects and plans. We are staying on schedule. But with the solid fuel launch, that technology has been transferred to the civilian sector, and so the civilian sector would be focusing more on their R&D in space and aerospace technologies. This is something that the Ministry of Science and ICT is working on. We are, of course, working together with them in close collaboration to also focus on development of a locally sourced rocket launch. And because we are focusing on the space age, I think that having a locally sourced launch vehicle of that kind will be very important for the Republic of Korea.
Thank you. Any other questions? If there are no further questions, we would like to also welcome the questions from our online participants. As you're watching the live broadcast via KTV and Arirang TV, there may be some questions, so I will be reading off some of the questions that are not redundant from what was already posed. So first, from RFA Seo Jae-deok. Last 12th, there was the National Assembly audit for DAPA, and for the past year, for 13 defense industries, 1.21 million cases of cyber threats or cyber hacking incidents arose. So are you aware of these cyber threats and hacking incidents? And are there specific attacks that is from or assumed to be from North Korea? So this was something that was reported at the National Assembly audit, and you do understand even though the exact number of cases of cyber attacks. When it comes to defense capabilities, as we are seeing more advanced technology, these cyber attacks are, of course, on the rise, and there are many of such. But I cannot specify a specific group or country that's the source of these cyber threats. We are, of course, engaging in analysis to understand the routes as well as the traits of these cyber attacks, and we are putting in place relevant countermeasures. That's basically it for my response. Thank you.
Yes, and when it comes to cyber threats, as the DG, the Director General, has mentioned, this is also a sensitive issue, especially for the defense industry. So we'd like to ask you for your kind understanding. Can the Director General maybe provide some extra explanation? I don't think that the DG can add any more comments, but with these hacking attempts, as you know, this is a fight between a spear and a shield. When there is a very advanced cutting-edge hacking attempt, even if we have very excellent tools at our disposal, it might not be enough. So we have to continuously upgrade and advance our own countermeasures as well. And to that end, it would be necessary to bring in the relevant laws and institutions. And right now, the National Assembly's Defense Committee has also tried to table a relevant bill to that regard.
Thank you. Any other questions? If there are no further questions, any questions coming in from our online participants? Before that, from Reuters, Josh Smith, do you have any additional questions?
Yeah, sorry, thank you for one more question. You mentioned the end of the missile guidelines that was agreed by South Korea and the United States earlier this year, and we've seen this year and previous years already, many new developments in South Korea's missile program. What's next? What can you tell us about in the future where you are looking for that?
As was mentioned, with regard to the missile guidelines, this was the consequence of the summit of the U.S. and ROK. And the basic spirit behind this is that our ally, the U.S., has been focused on this based on Korea's efforts for non-proliferation. So, with regard to any additional missile development plans, it would not spring up all of a sudden because we have a mid to long-term strategy. It's for national defense, and we will be putting in place the right defense capabilities, and this principle will hold true and will be valid going forward. And irrespective of the missile discussion, I've mentioned about some new defense R&D domains, and there are various new technologies that are springing up from Industry 4.0. So we are going to invest more budget in R&D so that we can utilize that in the defense area. And one example would be the manned and unmanned vehicles, laser arms. So these would be some areas where we will be increasing our investments in. And with regard to surveillance assets, we will continue on to acquire these assets at a rapid pace. Thank you.
Are there any further questions? From Sky News? Extra question. The North Korean SLBM was already developed several years ago, it appears, and for the ROK, you've recently developed the SLBM. But many have said that the performance is quite great. The performance is better for the Korean ROK SLBMs. It's much more advanced. How do you assess the performance of the Korean SLBMs? I think that you, sir, know better of this than I do. I don't think it's wise of me to sit here today and compare and contrast our SLBM's capabilities against DPRK's, but I can tell you that we are of a very highly advanced defense capability. Are there any additional questions?
From Al Jazeera. Yes, I am Kim Yooni, Peter from Al Jazeera, and let me ask my question in English. It's a follow-up question. So the DAPA mentioned about a 1.49 trillion won budget, and compared to the budget this year, this was a major increase, which was a 76% increase. And I do know that in the report it indicated that a lot of that would be going to R&D. You've mentioned about the laser weaponry, but with regard to these game-changing technologies, are there specific technologies that you are going to concentrate on going forward? And would this change the face of future warfare? Thank you. Yes, as was mentioned, we've submitted our budget to the National Assembly, and they need to approve that. And as mentioned, we've increased our R&D budget by more than 70%, and that was how our proposal was submitted to the National Assembly. So if we look at the technological trends about what the future warfare would look like and what kind of threat would be posed, and if we don't respond to that, then in instilling peace, there can be certain things that we need to look into. So that's why we're going to invest in R&D to respond to these threats. And I did give a couple of examples, but if I go into all of the specifics, it's about opening up our overall defense capability strategy. So due to confidentiality reasons, I will have to limit my response. But just to give you a high-level overview, it's about Industry 4.0, Fourth Industrial Revolution. So what we want to do is make sure that we're not a laggard in technological advancement. In the past, it's true that we had a catch-up strategy where what we wanted to do was follow what was already developed by other countries. So we were more of a fast follower type of approach. However, we would like to break away from that, where for certain domains, we want to focus on the capabilities that we have, especially if it's world-class capabilities. If there is certain technologies in the civilian domain, we're going to make sure to cooperate and develop this further. And if there are any R&D investments necessary, we will be active in providing that investments. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any additional questions? As you well know, the ROK's defense industry is one of the top in the world. We are doing and advancing our defense capabilities for the sake of peace. And DAPA is focusing on mutual cooperation, Fourth Industrial Revolution, R&D, post-COVID, and anti-hacking. I think that he has been very detailed in his responses. Are there any additional questions? If there are no more questions, we'd like to move on to the concluding remarks of the minister.
Well, I actually delivered my opening remarks in English, but my closing, I would like to speak in Korean. Once again, thank you very much for your kind attention, participation, and your thoughtful questions. As was mentioned, since the establishment of DAPA, this was the very first event to invite our foreign correspondents for a press conference in a Q&A session. And the reason why we decided to hold this event was because with regard to defense capabilities and our forces and for our national defense, we wanted to actively be involved in international peace as well as maintaining order around the world. So we wanted to make sure that we portray how we're contributing in that endeavor. And with regard to our developments in our defense capabilities, we wanted to introduce that to our members of the press and also encourage all of those in the defense industries. I do know that there are many angles that you are taking in looking into our defense capabilities, but as I did mention in my opening remarks, with regard to procurement, we want to expand the opportunities to our domestic industries as much as possible. And we are not engaging in advancing our defense capabilities with a certain domain or certain system in mind. And what we want to do is want to mention that we do have our windows open for other overseas contractors, and we want to mention that if it can be in the form of having more domestic players on board in your endeavors, you would have even further better fruitful opportunities. So once again, thank you very much for all of your questions and your attention. And I do know that all of our foreign correspondents will take part in a field trip scheduled tomorrow. You will be visiting the manufacturer of KF-21, so I hope that you can come to see in person how far Korea's defense projects have come. And also next week, ADEX 2021 will take place. You will be able to understand the technological developments of our allies as well as Korea's defense capabilities. So I hope that it's a productive opportunity. Once again, this was our very first press conference, but going forward, we'd like to see you as often, as frequently as possible, and we try to put in our best effort to provide you with a more detailed elaboration to your questions. Once again, thank you very much for your participation.
Thank you very much to our presenters and, of course, our foreign journalists. Thank you very much. And we will see you at the next policy forum. With that, we would like to conclude the FPC Korea Policy Forum, the Minister of Defense Acquisition.